Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. What would you think are the two most common words that Christians use when they're in a panic or in a crisis? Do something. Do something, Lord. It's absolutely against human nature to stand still and do nothing when there's a crisis and there's trouble and difficulty on all hands. And probably the most difficult thing for even Christians is to stand still and wait for God to act. To stand still to see the salvation of the Lord. Even the most devoted of Christians panic when God doesn't move according to their time schedule. We're always giving God dates. We're always giving him a time limit. Lord, if you don't do it by now or by tomorrow or by next week, it's too late. God is never too late, and he's going to do it not on your schedule, not on mine. He's going to do it on his own schedule. But God is always and has always been searching the earth for those who will trust him in their crisis, in every trial, and especially when it seems hopeless. And he will lead us, listen closely, he will lead us into situations that are alarming, that are critical, that seem hopeless, to test us. The devil has nothing to do with it at all. It's God leading into the crisis. The Bible states fairly clearly, the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, Psalms 37:23. And that in Hebrew is prearranged, step by step, fixed, ordained by God. I'm going to tell you something. I believe that every step that I take is prearranged by my Father. Every step that I take is ordered by the Lord. Now, if I believe that, if I'm in a crisis, if I'm in a very, very difficult situation, he's led me there. Because he doesn't stop for a moment while he says, well, you're about to go into a trial. I direct you up to this point. You're on your own now. He directs me into it, through it, and out of it. The steps of a good man, and we are good only by the blood of Jesus anyhow. There's no goodness in us. A good man made righteous through the blood of Jesus Christ is her steps ordered by the Lord. God's word is filled with examples of this. And by the way, it's hard to accept. Think about it for a minute. It's very, very hard to accept this concept that the most difficult, critical times in your life have been prearranged by the Lord. That they are his doing. And folks, when you begin to see that and accept it and understand it, then you're halfway through your problem.
Good evening. Rich here, Theories of Creation, ProverbsGuys Ministry. Panel is open. DC should be coming in here soon. There he is, going to talk about geology. So I was listening to that introduction a little bit, and just a small testimony. I want to get into details, but I was having kind of a rough evening, a rough day, dealing with a bunch of other stuff, and I couldn't really figure out why. It started over something dumb, but it just escalated. And then listening to what Stephen wrote in that introduction, something dawned on me. I'm kind of out of place with what I'm doing. I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. God called me into ministry, and I've been taking a step back for personal reasons. And after I realized that, and I started putting things together, getting prepared for this evening's discussion on geology, it's like all of that stress went away. I believe if you're out of place or what God wants you to do, then you're going to feel that tribulation, that strife, and that stress and that tribulation. But when you get into what God has planned for you, all that stuff goes away if you just remain focused on Him. Just something that crossed my heart over the last 10 minutes or so. But yeah, we're going to cover where we left off with the hydroplate theory and some discussions on the Grand Canyon, different theories about geology and rivers and canyons around the world. Uh, Dan will not be joining us tonight. We're using his studio, but DC is definitely here. How you doing, DC? How's things out there in Hawaii?
I'm good, but just as I joined here, like a massive storm just hit. So the rain's going horizontal, and I don't know if you can hear it. So hopefully it passes quick. It usually does here, but it was blue skies, blue ocean, and then in the last minute, it just went downhill. I am on Starlink, so hopefully the connection. If not, I'll rejoin in a minute or two when it clears.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
I'm doing good.
you can hear a little bit of interference, but it's not too bad overall.
Okay, yeah, that's just the rain pounding the house pretty hard. But that's the thing I do love about this place is it's sunshine and rain. It's usually sunshine then rain, sunshine then rain. So it's never dry. Things grow 24/7. Um, I love it because I like things that are green and growing, and we need water for that. But it is kind of crazy how fast storms can come and go here.
I was just reminded of I was living in Nashville, Tennessee about 10 years ago, and I had a second job just valeting cars, right? And we'd pick up your Mercedes or whatever, drive it to a parking lot, and then, sprint back or just jog or run back. Well, on one of the trips coming back, a storm cell moved in. I don't know if it was on the edge of like a tornado or something, but I've never been hit with a wall of water that quick. It only lasted 30 seconds or something like that. But the back side of me was completely soaked. My shirt and the front of my pants were still dry. It was the weirdest thing I've ever experienced. I don't know if you guys get to storms like coming that quickly out there in Hawaii. But
Well, what's weird is when I first moved here in 2019, I would hear this loud sound coming from the east, and I was like, "What in the world is that?" And it took me a couple times to realize that it was the torrential rain just being bombarded from the ocean onto the land. So the trees and all the leaves were just being hit by. I mean, the rain here is not like I've seen any. I mean, this is the wettest place on earth, so clearly, when it rains, it wants to rain. And, it can be a couple inches an hour or greater, which is a lot of water. But it took me by surprise because you could hear the rain coming, and then eventually was like, okay, if I hear that sound and I'm outside mowing the lawn or something, I figure I got about 2 to 3 minutes to get into a house before that wall of rain comes and hits down. But yeah, it'd be something similar. But I've never seen water come down at the rate it does here anywhere else I've ever been.
yeah, one of these days I'm going to go out there and visit Hawaii. I've been to 49 or 50 states, and Hawaii is the last one I have to visit yet.
Oh, wow. I haven't counted how many states I've been in, but I'm probably 35 to 40 that I've been to. Most of the ones I haven't been to is in the Northeast. I have been to Delaware, Pennsylvania. I don't like Pennsylvania. Had some bad experiences there. I hauling a crane that weighed 118,000 pounds, and
Oh, geez.
instead of letting me go down, I think it was I-80. It's been a few years. That was 2009. Instead of being able to go on, at the bottom across from Delaware straight across the bottom, the state made me go up north on I-95, take a tiny little windy road to go up to I-90, and then over and then back down because they didn't want me on the bottom highway. But they sent me on a road that was not designed for my truck. I was 100 and hey, didn't look like I lost you.
Oh,
Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm back now.
Okay. Yeah, the little road that it took me up was not designed. I'm 125 feet long. Gross vehicle weight. I'm 11 axles, and I weighed like, what was it? 192,000 pounds. And this is my own truck. There was nowhere for me to pull over, so I had to keep driving, and then I got pulled over. And then I had cops get in a fight because they didn't know what to do with me because I nowhere for me to go. anyways, long story short, it cost me about $14,000 to drive through the state of Pennsylvania.
No,
And
geez. Man.
I got a citation for a violation on my oversized permit, but at the same time, the cops had no solution, and so the only solution they had was give me the ticket for oversized violation on the route they put me on, and then the only way for me to continue on is to violate the oversized permit, and so they promised me that they wouldn't pull me over again. So I don't know. I don't like Pennsylvania because they forced me on that road, and then they have no solution. Whatever. So bad experience. Took me 2 weeks to get from Delaware to Utah.
Oh, geez, man.
Yeah, but
Yeah, I used to drive a 18-wheeler over the road when I was in my 20s just to, see the country and get paid for it and whatnot. And it's a beautiful world out there, man. But I did notice a lot of similarities. You stretch across the country, the geologic strata out there is very, very similar. The layers look almost identical. And I do remember watching a couple documentaries from Is Genesis History that some of those layers of geologic strata are cover, half of the country. And there are no erosion marks and there are no root structures laid down. Well, if that layer was there for millions of years before the next one laid down on top of it, and water has been on this planet since the beginning, where are the erosion marks? Where are the root structures?
yeah. And I think that's actually, I'm glad that I was wondering, did I go off a tangent here? But it's a great point because you experienced what I did. I'm Delaware. I've hauled equipment up to Washington, Oregon. I avoided California because, what trucker likes California? Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, Nebraska. And during these times, I was, a member of the LDS church and I wasn't questioning my religion at the time. But, when you drive across and you physically see these long stratas, these long depositations that you can find in Ohio are the same ones that you find in the Grand Canyon, and they're different layers. And it does, you're like, why is it, if they say that coal is created by swampy marshlands, and you think like, Georgia, Louisiana, like down by the Mississippi going into the Gulf of America, they swampy areas like Florida too, where it's just all these trees are growing and it's just this biomass that's being dropped down. Well, how come we don't have tree trunks and roots and things in the coal? We don't see that. And that's what it starts to raise your question is like, even in Utah, I've got I forgot I had them on my camera, but I got, a $9,000 camera that last year I took a whole bunch of pictures, and I have pictures in high detail, 48 megapixel, on this $9,000 camera that you can just zoom in on the coal layers, and you've got tiny little coal layers, and some of them are only like 4 inches thick. And then right above that is like a foot thick of sandstone. And then on top of that, another 6-inch layer of coal, and then a foot layer of red sandstone. And you're like, if this was the edge, explain that to me, because that biomass wouldn't exist in a long depositation. It would go away. But again, when you look at these, even the bigger ones that they're 2-3 feet thick, right on the side of the highway, there's no root systems in them, none. But if it was what they claim it was, a marshland, my question is where's the evidence of the trees that had to have been there to produce the marshland? There's no evidence of it. You don't find root systems or these things in the coal, which is, but yeah, driving across the country, you get to see all these things, and you just, as a trucker, sometimes you just don't really have much to do but look outside the window and then contemplate what you're looking at. And there's thousands of places all over the country that just, I wonder, how did that happen?
There's one picture I've been trying to find since I brought it up. Somewhere along Interstate 81, maybe I-71 or I-26, somewhere out there was a section where they carved out uh, a side of a mountain and put the interstate down, and some of the most beautiful um, bended layers of strata, are just exposed on both sides of the highway. And they put a little rest area there, and I've been trying to find it, but all that bent strata um, doesn't have any fracture lines to it. I've been trying to find it. Um, but also, you talk about coal. A good friend of mine, it might be too late. I don't know if he'd want to come in. I probably need to ask him about it. But he was a coal miner for most of his career. And he shared some stories where he's taken off some chunks of shale and there's just a gorgeous fossil just laid out, right there. Maybe we can do a third part on this and we can get him involved in it to share some of the things that he's seen. He's an amazing man of God too.
Yeah, it's you. There is, coal miners will find stuff in the coal that you know artifacts from humans found in coal. There's all sorts of things that are in those layers that just does not align with the geological stuff that we're told. And that's what really kind of brought me to a place where maybe there's better answers than what we're given, right? Is when these things are exposed, do we just disregard it like geologists do because it doesn't fit our theory, or is there a better explanation? And that's kind of the position I've taken, is there has to be better explanations for these things than just what we're told. Because yeah, I mean, when you really are in it, that's actually one thing I want to point out. Whether it's religion, whether it's science, whether it's geology, whether it's astrology, a lot of times we're given answers that suffice, like, oh, what about this or that? And so they'll give an answer, but when you go to try and apply it, you can't apply it. The saying is the devil's in the details, but I'd argue it's God's in the details, because the closer in you get, right, the further from the truth you actually get, because it just exposes the flaw to their theories. Like we heard on the last video, right? The Mariana Trench, the deepest trench west side of the Pacific Plate, and supposedly that plate is diving down underneath the Indian Plate. And then you've got I forgot that last guy that was on, Big Bad Mama. I forgot what the term was, and then he reminded me. He was like, "Oh yeah, I do know what you're talking about." 1 second, I'm going to pull it up. Sometimes I'm bad with names. It's amazing I can remember the details I do, but for some reason I can't remember names. Accretionary prisms is what they call, and this is what I was talking about. I just forgot that that's what the name was, right? Yeah. But these prisms is talking about what I'm talking about. If a plate is subducting underneath another plate, it's going to shear off the top, and then we're going to see the evidence of that. Now, on the surface, they give you this as an example that, like the Pacific Plate going underneath, and there's a couple places around the world where it appears that there is, crumbling stuff like I've described that there should be. But it's only like a couple places. Like, it doesn't explain the Mariana Trench if it's going underneath the Indian Plate, because we don't see that there. If it was there, the Mariana Trench would be filled with this accretionary prisms. And that's what I'm pointing out is from the zoomed out, yes, it makes sense, plate going underneath, you're going to have that. My thing was, show me. I learned this from being a Mormon, because when I was a Mormon, I was told a bunch of fancy things, and it was believable. I was born into it. It made sense. So I didn't question it. Then when I started learning about the truth and coming out of it, and then I would go and learn something else, right? I began to realize that, wait a second, I can easily be fallen victim to someone sounding like they have an answer, but when you dive into it, the answer doesn't suffice. Tourists pulling into the driveway. When you dive deeper, these answers become very flawed. They might answer one place, right? But like for instance, I was just looking it up earlier. So they have, I was looking at where it was. So they have some southern uplands in Scotland. It says an ancient exposed accretionary prism formed during the closure of the ancient Platypus Ocean. There's another one in Japan. Um, the most studied accretionary prisms, heavily monitored by ocean drillings. But there's not very many examples, and so they'll take 4, 5, or 10 of these and then apply it to the entire planet. But there can be other things that can explain why that's there, right? But they're taking those few examples and then applying it over across the mass. When you go into the detail of it, it's like, okay, well, if this accretionary prism is true, then we should see it everywhere that this plate is diving under in the subduction zone, and we don't. So their answers, when you go into it, sounds great because they give you examples, but then when you go to apply it to all the places that it's supposedly going under, if you notice in the list, we don't have that list for the Pacific plate and the American continent. We don't have that. There isn't evidence of that. What the evidence we see is not aligning with it, and that's when I learned, coming out of Mormonism, is like, okay, if you say it and claim it, then prove it, right? I'm going to go on a religious tangent here so you can understand what I'm talking about. The Mormon LDS Church is under attack right now. They're not. They've been labeled as non-Christian by the I don't remember, some branch of the government that deals with the military. Anyways, there's a big argument about Mormons being Christian and stuff. And so it sounds, because they have the name Jesus Christ in the title of the church. And so because that, they say, well, we believe in Jesus Christ, so we're Christian. And okay, on the surface, you might be right, but what is it that you're believing in Jesus Christ? Because the New Testament teaches us that we're saved by grace and not by works. So if you're a member of the LDS Church and you want to be saved by grace, then apply it. And this is what I'm saying about geology, anything else in the world. Show me where you can apply it. If I was not a member and I joined the Mormon Church today, get baptized today, can I go into the Mormon temple today? The answer is no. You can't. Okay, so what you're saying is there's no grace that is applied to this. Yeah, the grace doesn't exist in that. On the other aspect, in order to go into the temple, you have to be a member for a minimum of a year, and then you have to go through interviews to make sure that you are perfectly loyal to that church, obedient to the rules, paying your 10% tithing. And if you do all of these things, then you're given a temple recommend. Again, if you fall short, if you drink a cup of coffee or during that year process, and you are not, you're now not worthy. And so in order to re-enter the temple to be worthy, you have to repent of that sin and stop doing that. Again, if you want to apply it, there is no grace applied to that situation. Right? When you actually try to apply it, it doesn't work. On the outside, it sounds great. We believe in Jesus. He's our Lord and Savior. Okay, then show me where you can apply the grace. If I died today and as a Mormon, active Mormon, and let's say my last paycheck, I didn't pay 10% tithing, well, according to the Mormon doctrine, you're not allowed to go into the celestial kingdom because you fell short. Again, where is the grace? And I bring that up as a
Sounds
point
like
of
money is their God at that point, brother.
What's that?
Sounds like money is their God at that point.
Yeah, I mean, you have to earn your way in, and if you want to convert all these things like tithing, paying your 10% tithing, and are you active in your, because they have church records, right? If you attend, they have your attendance records,
Well, I think
whole
that's what
list.
the Mormon Church kind of gets wrong is if you can earn your way in by paying your tithes and doing works and all that, then what was the point of Jesus Christ coming down in the first place? Why did God need to nail Christ to the cross if we can, gain our salvation back by not sinning or by tithing enough church? God doesn't use money. Money is a man-made tool. Why do we need to give it to the church in order to gain our salvation. I
Yeah,
immediately think of the Pharisees or Jesus going out and flipping tables, and what the Pharisees were doing, taking from people,
right. And so if you do want to take that to help you understand, right, it's all works based. If you want to say, okay, paying your tithing is worth $10,000 if you do it on time, right? Let's say you need $100,000 to enter the celestial kingdom, and paying your tithing on time, the 10% loyal gives you $10,000, and let's say being active and attending church every Sunday gives you another $7,000, right? And you apply that kind of thing to all of it. Let's say you end up with only $95,000. Well, according to the Mormon doctrine, you're sure you don't make it. That's the whole thing, is you have to earn it to get there. And so my argument is it sounds great on the surface, where the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we believe Jesus Christ my Savior. That's what I'm trying to point out here, is apply the grace. There is no grace in Mormon doctrine. You say it, but you can't claim it because there's nowhere to apply it. And that's my point with the geology and anything else that we discuss, is some of these theories sound great on the surface. Mormons believe in Jesus Christ. Great. That sounds great. Plate tectonics is true because we can see that there's movement of the plates. Okay, you see movements of the plates, but it doesn't prove that plates are diving underneath another plate. And then they say, oh, like the accretionary, right? You can't find that. And I want to ask a question. If you take a stop sign, it's an octagon, right? And that plate is going west and diving underneath, say just picture a stop sign as the Pacific plate, and the stop sign is diving underneath the Indian plate. The whole stop sign should be going over, or there should be something in the middle splitting it. The problem is you can't have it going in all directions at the same time. So when you have a bunch of different angles and plates are moving, and they're moving in opposite directions, but yet there's nothing in the middle splitting the plate or making those lines, then it doesn't solve it. There's holes in that theory, right? And the only place in the Pacific Ocean, I forget what it's called, but it's kind of, if you were to look at the center of the Pacific Ocean, it would be like east of Hawaii, maybe 1,000 miles, I'm guessing, maybe a little bit further south. There's just a little tiny bent line. And that's the only place that scientists can claim, hey, that's where the plate is splitting. But again, that would be one direction, and it doesn't actually work when you apply it. And so,
your buddy just showed up in the comments.
Yeah, and Big Bad Mama. It's weird calling you a Big Bad Mama when you're a dude, but just have to put that out there. But I do appreciate your presence and the things you have to say. My point is your theories that you believe in plate tectonics works on the surface, but show me. That's where I've gotten over the years, is show me. I want proof. You can claim it, but if you can't prove it, then all it is just a fantasy that is unprovable. Bending and folding of rocks, yes, you can do that at miles below the surface with temperatures at or above 300 degrees Celsius. But again, it's like, in order for that folded rock to come to the surface, then there has to be an enormous amount of erosion, which is how you explain stuff. But the problem is if I take what you say, and then I look at a situation, and your method doesn't work, then we have to reevaluate what the method is. And for me, does hydroplate theory explain absolutely everything? No. It might have a few holes here and there. So it doesn't matter what theory it is, there's going to be, issues that maybe we have to adjust or something. The problem I got with plate tectonics is the evidence just isn't there. If you have folded rock, or if you have crushed gravels in a few places around the world where the plates are at a plate boundary, that does not make it proof or factual that crushed material creating from those prisms, that doesn't prove that it's plate tectonics. And even like when you do a survey, right, where you can do ground penetrating radar and you see hot spots and cool spots. And then you'll be like, okay, well, that proves that that's a subduction plate. No, that's an idea. You can't prove it. It's an idea, but there's other things that can also explain a cooler and a hot. And they like to use red and blue, for instance, to make the blue look cold and then around it being hot magma. But when we're talking about it, it's only a few degrees. But there's a big, bright, round thing in the sky out there that gives us all the light that we have. And we know that there's different temperatures even on the surface to being just under the surface. Does that mean that there's subducting plates underneath the sun? No, it just means that there's difference in temperature and something could be causing a difference in temperature. And these subduction zones that are supposed subduction zones where they have things that are going down and this is a little bit cooler by a few degrees than the outside. Yeah, that's an anomaly. We don't know if it's a machine error. I think it's probably pretty accurate, but again, it comes to the interpretation of it. Nobody's drilled into those. We don't know what those were. You can't say, well, this subduction plate was actually under, Missouri 30 million years ago. It's just a hypothesis. It's a theory, but it comes back to the interpretation of the data that we see. And if you apply it to all places on Earth, right? Okay, if we're going to see this data with the subduction zones, and we're going to see all these things 100% under every subduction zone, but we don't. There's holes in these theories. And so for me, unless you can actually answer these problems, I just have to say, hold up, I can't go there. And that's what I say is I had to learn through my process of coming out of Mormonism that if you're going to preach and say something, prove it to me, show it to me. I want the proof. I want the evidence, because for me, I got angry at God years ago after coming out of Mormonism for a few years, because I felt like no matter which direction I went, I got lied to. I got so sick and tired of hearing a lie that sounds believable. And this is even coming out of the Mormon church in the Christian community is like, it seems like every direction I turn, there's a lie that I have to overcome. And that's what really got me down to it is if you claim it, then show me. If you can't show me on every aspect, then I have to question the method. And you fold rocks under heat and pressure and without them shattering, breaking, or turning them into metamorphic rock. Yes, because we do have laboratory experience. Okay, then show me where 100% of every single one of these granite rocks that are folded, that it proves that was down below when it was formed, right? Because if you can't, then we have a problem that is unresolved that doesn't match your theory. So for me, I've taken a step back and I've looked at these places like, okay, I have to rethink these things that I'm seeing, because what I'm seeing is not matching what I'm being told is the process. And that's where all of a sudden, you start to collect up evidence over a while. One thing, maybe you can explain it away. But a collection of these problems, all these geological issues, the plate tectonics, the volcanoes, why is the volcanoes really only around the Pacific plate? Yes, we have volcanoes around the entire planet, but 90% of all the volcanoes are around the Pacific plate. If plate tectonics was true, we should have a similar volume of volcanoes around all of the plates that are subducting, not just one, right? And so this is where I start to have issue is there has to be a better explanation, because, a plate tectonic is not going to explain why this mountain range got pushed up and then you have a 2-mile gap, and then all of a sudden now there's another mountain mountain range pushed up and it's in a different angle, and you're like, plate tectonics, it can't explain this. It just doesn't jive. And that's where I've come to, is just understanding if there's a problem, then I have to reevaluate. And in my reevaluation of things, a collective of evidence, that proved to me that the LDS Church is not true, because the volume of evidence just unequivocally just proves it's not true or from God. If it was one or two things, maybe it can be explained away, but the volume says, no, we have an issue. Clearly, it's a fraud. Apply the same things to plate tectonics. Can you explain it in certain places here? There is a possibility? Yeah, sure, some of them do. But just like Mormonism, it's the same thing. The picture going back, it sounds good. But when you go into it, there becomes problems, and that's where I've changed and had to reevaluate. So when we're talking about the hydroplate theory, I've become a huge fan of it because I have come to the same conclusion as a lot of the hydroplate theory without even knowing about the hydroplate theory, just because I understand the mechanics of things, of hydraulics and lifting and, and if you're going to raise a mountain over millions of years, you're not going to get the alluvial fanning that you see. It just doesn't work. And that's where I come to the conclusion and find out about the hydroplate theory. And Jesus, like everything I had assumed on everything they talk about lines up exactly with my conclusion. And so that's like, okay, that makes better sense to me over a volume of big things. And that doesn't mean there might not be problems that need to be adjusted, but overall, the volume of evidence supports hydroplate theory way over plate tectonics as far as one plate subducting underneath another, creating volcanoes and mountain ranges. Just to me, just doesn't suffice. Hydroplate theory does. Sorry, that was a long rant.
No, you're good. I'm trying to find these pictures while you were doing it, but I did come across a couple things when you were talking about coal earlier, and I managed to save them, and I think I would like to share those here. Let me pull those up here really quick. These were found in coal, and if it takes millions and billions of years to form coal, how on earth did these get here?
And while you're pulling that up, the thing about this is if you test that with C14, you're going to 100% of every single time. Okay, let's just say 99% in case there is some weird thing that happened, that you're going to get carbon 14 in it.
How did this?
That's impossible if this coal is 220 million years. And again, that's what I mentioned earlier, that I'm glad you found it and brought it up, is how do you explain these man-made objects in coal from 220 million years ago? But they won't publish this stuff because it doesn't fit their narrative, and so it's not published in any article that is published by the governing community. These things are found in coal. Coal miners test to this all around the world. They're always finding things like this. Are you telling me that maybe we haven't really thought this through? Maybe the dinosaurs made those.
Right, that's what it was. T-Rex with those skimpy little arms.
Yeah,
Wielding the hammer.
velociraptors and pterodactyls may be more advanced than we thought. I might have to reconsider.
So when we left off last night, we were trying to play that video.
Yeah,
with
Ken
Dr.
Hovind.
Yeah, presentation of how the Grand Canyon was formed. I didn't realize at the time that I made a recording of it, but it's only in 480p. It's not the best quality, but nonetheless, it's still here. But I've got it pulled up. I don't know if you've seen this one yet. If you haven't, I think you'd really enjoy it. Let's see here. No, this one, share.
Now, it's always amazed me how two people can look at the same thing and come to opposite conclusions of what they are seeing. Two people can look at Grand Canyon. One of them believes in evolution. He looks at the canyon and says, wow, look what the Colorado River did for millions and millions of years. The Bible-believing Christian stands there, looks at the same canyon, and says, wow, look what the flood did in about 30 minutes. Now, how was that canyon formed anyway? This textbook says over millions of years, the Colorado River has carved the Grand Canyon from solid rock. Now, just slow down a minute. Kids, it is a fact Grand Canyon exists. How many have been to Grand Canyon? I taught Earth Science, studied Grand Canyon avidly. I like Grand Canyon. Beautiful place. Big hole in the ground. Now, there are two interpretations of how it got there. The evolutionists have an interpretation, and so do the creationists. The evolutionist is going to tell you that canyon formed slowly by a little bit of water and lots of time. Millions of years. The creationist is going to tell you, oh, the canyon formed quickly by lots of water and a little bit of time.
It went muted. There's no sound.
Cut through layer upon layer of rock over
There we go.
millions of
Better.
years.
Yeah, let me back it up. I
I was in a
tried.
debate one time, and this atheist said, "Oh, but you're so
Hold on.
dumb. Don't you know it took millions of years to make Grand Canyon?" The evolutionist is going to tell you that evolutionists have an interpretation, and so do the creationists. The evolutionist is going to tell you that canyon formed slowly by a
I went mute at the same spot again.
canyon formed quickly.
It's back.
I'm trying to mute my own myself, but I'm muting it instead.
The
Okay.
guys who believe in evolution are continually trying to erase the line between creation and the fact column, and they want you to somehow think that what they interpret as evidence is now part of the fact. You got to really watch them on this. They're pretty slick. This textbook author does it just blatantly. He says, the Colorado River has cut through layer upon layer of rock over millions of years. Now just hold on a minute. I was in a debate one time, and this atheist said, "Oh, but you're so dumb. Don't you know it took millions of years to make Grand Canyon?" I said, "Well, sir, I taught earth science for years. I really enjoy studying Grand Canyon." I said, "Did you know if you built a dam across Grand Canyon, that would take a lot of dirt, by the way, but if you did, a huge lake would fill in behind it. Did you know some of the water from Montana drains through the Grand Canyon? It's a huge drainage area." I said, "Sir, did you know that in between these two red lines is what we call the snow line? There's a ridge right there. The Grand Canyon enters at the far right over here. The elevation of the river at that point is 2,800 feet above sea level. The river flows downhill for 270 miles. It comes out the other side. And in between, while the river's flowing down, the ground is rising up and then slowly coming back down. It is so wide, 270 miles, that you don't notice it until you get way back and look at it from a satellite. But if you look at it in a cross section, this schematic shows the difference here. The river enters right here and flows downhill, comes out the other side. It's actually going through a giant ridge, 270 miles long. At the highest point of the ridge, the river's at about 1,800 foot elevation, so it's nearly a 1 mile drop down into the canyon. Really big hole in the ground. I said, "Now, sir, there are a couple things you ought to consider about Grand Canyon." I said, "Did you know the top of Grand Canyon is higher than the bottom?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Sir, did you know the river runs through the bottom?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Sir, did you know the top is higher than where the river enters the canyon by over 4,000 feet?" I said, "Sir, did you know that rivers don't flow uphill?" I said, "Sir, did you know there is no delta? Nobody knows where the mud is that got washed out of there, but it's probably out in the Pacific Ocean. They can't find the delta for Grand Canyon. There is no possible way that river made that canyon. Grand Canyon is quite obviously a washed out spillway. There used to be two big lakes, Grand Lake and Hopi Lake, and they got too full one day, who knows when. I suspect shortly after the flood, maybe a few hundred years later, the ice caps melted or something, and the lakes got too full, and the water went over the top, while the ground was still relatively soft. Then the first few hundred years washed out that canyon in a hurry. There are still beaches where the lakes used to be. They call them Grand Lake and Hopi Lake. The
I've
lake is
seen
all
them.
gone, but you can still see the beach line
The beach line?
where the lake used to be.
Yep.
Canyon is a washed out spillway, folks. The water got too deep, went over the top, and washed out that whole region in a real big hurry. So when they tell you it took millions of years, they're lying to you. It did not. It's not geophysically possible. If you look at the way most rivers come together, almost all rivers join at what are called acute angles, less than 90 degrees. You can look at any map of the world, nearly all rivers come together and keep going the same general direction. Well, if you look at Grand Canyon, the rivers on the lower left side join at acute angles, normal river pattern. If you look at the right side, the rivers go backwards and run into the channel and turn around and come back the other way. This is evidence of a big lake that is draining. Any farmer that's ever built a dam to hold water to feed his cows or something, to water his cows, will tell you, once the water goes over the top of the dam, it can wash it out in a hurry. And it doesn't wash away the whole dam, it washes one slot, wherever the water finds the weakest point. So the water's running backwards off the dam to hit the lower channel, turn around, come back the other way. Grand Canyon was not formed by the Colorado River, folks. Grand Canyon was formed by a flood.
Yeah, and in fact, I don't know. Do you want to pull up Google Earth? I can kind of show you what he's talking about, because it's fascinating. There's a couple places along here that when you like I said, when you zoom into the details start to disagree with millions of years evolution or of erosion, and in the mountain, the Kaibab Plateau lifting up. The evidence just doesn't support it. So just let me know. I can either give you a location and type it in, or I can guide you there, whichever you want to do best.
It's loading
If
right
you
now.
if you
I'm
just
trying to
type
remember. I
in
think last
bitter,
time
just type in Bitter Springs and have it take you there. That'll take you to the edge of kind of like the center of where we want to talk about,
Bitter
or even
Spring,
Marble Canyon.
Bitter Springs, Australia,
No, this would be
Arizona. Village in
Arizona.
Arizona. Okay.
And this is one of those roads I drove on with a semi that goes along the edge of this. Trying to remember what highway that is. There's some really deep cuts going from the top of the plateau down into the bottom where we're going to discuss. There's a highway there that I've driven on so many times, which is pretty cool. Yeah, there you go. So that red is at the right edge of the canyon. So zoom out. There you go. See that canyon? Now, what he was talking about, and no, I haven't seen that video before, but what he was talking about is see that whole fan area? It looks like at the top, it's narrow and then it widens with the canyon in the middle of it. That's the Colorado River that the Hopi Lake and the Grand Lake drained out of that carved all that out. Now,
Right. Okay. Yeah. Here's the Grand Canyon. Here's where.
yeah, and it goes down, dips down or below the green, and then it comes up to where your red dot is in the middle. Well, to the left, right? But if you notice, look at what the tributaries going into the Colorado, which direction they're facing. What that does, and it's a feature that doesn't matter where you're at on Earth, it's always going to be consistent. Whatever the ground. So, are you on Google Earth? I can't see what you're on. If
Yeah, I
you
am
click,
on Google Earth. Do you want maps?
just where you have your red dot, just click it to the left, anywhere to the left that's in that lighter gray or brown. My brain doesn't work. Yeah, just anywhere on top, not in the canyon.
Here.
But yeah, and it should give you an elevation, like probably 40 something 100 feet, I'm guessing. Does it show a elevation where you're at?
I don't know how to use this program. No, not exactly. We can figure it out.
Okay, I'm using my map and I'm going to try to see where you did it. So 4,096 feet.
Oh,
So
okay. There you go. Of course, it has it in meters. Let me switch this over to empirical.
yeah, we're not.
Just right around 5,000 feet.
Okay. Now click on the same place to the north where it gets narrower. And remember this. You said you're at 5,000 feet. Yeah, go up there now. Click on the side, not in the canyon. Click on that elevation.
Right, we're at 3,900 feet. It's 1,000 foot
Okay,
less.
so 1,100 feet. So the elevation is going down. Now go to the other side, to the bottom. Go down to the bottom, but staying on that plateau. But yeah, right about before it goes green. So right at the top of your screen, like almost right at the top.
It says preview unavailable.
Don't go on the green if you can stay to the right side because we don't want to have conflicting data. So yeah, just right in there. Click
yeah,
right there where your mouse was.
I'm not getting an elevation this time. Let me try loading it up. It says preview unavailable.
If you need to, just slide, to the north and to the west or east just slightly, but just go until it does give you one.
Okay, that's 513.
Yeah, if you can get one on that plateau
6,
right there.
It'll work.
There you go.
6,000 feet right there.
So we go from there, 6,000 feet, to the middle where you started is 5,000, and then to the top of it is 3,900 feet. So that entire plateau, the water sheds to the north, not to the south through the Colorado. And that is why if you look at the tributaries in that, they're angled in the direction that the water flows. So you're either generally about 30% to 90 degrees, but see how they're all pointing like to the north, draining into it?
Yeah.
That's because the water before the Grand Canyon, that's where the water was shedding off of, which would be, in my argument, that would be a case against the argument of geologists saying that the Kaibab Plateau, and the Kaibab Plateau is the green on the left of your screen.
Yep.
That Kaibab Plateau, the top of that is a lot higher. It's over 6,000 feet, right? They're claiming that the mountain rose, that Kaibab Plateau, at the same time the Colorado was cutting through it. If that's the case, you would not have the river flowing backwards. It doesn't. There's a 2,000 foot difference between where it cuts through at the top of the plateau to the bottom of the plateau. See that? From left to right, it slopes from the left down to the right. So their explanation, again, when you go into the details of it, it just, to me, the evidence just doesn't support that theory that the Kaibab Plateau was flat, the Colorado was cutting through, then the mountain range rose up through, which is how the only way they can explain it for that Colorado to cut through there. And that's again, when I'm talking about show me, right? We have evidence around it that not only do we have the Colorado, but look at that big fan. You know, the big fan, it goes narrow where it was at 3,900 feet, where clearly it breached, and then it goes out in a fan getting wider to the south and to the west. Before it gets to the Kaibab Plateau, you just see a big, like, you know, a fan, a funnel that the water came out of. It's very evident. Yeah, see that from the right to the left? So that all that shaded, or the area that has no growth on it's because the water, as it drained off these lakes, took all the sediment with it, the soft sediment, right? Now, one of the arguments that like Big Bag Mama was here and gone, but brought up was that if the sediment was soft, then it wouldn't explain like the steep, sharp cliffs. But that's assuming that it's muddy. We're talking soft, which is different. And the other thing too is we have limestone in there. And if anyone knows about anything with concrete has lime in it. What lime does is it allows a little bit longer process before it turns hard. That's what makes concrete and turn hard, is the chemical reaction of lime. But the lime in the concrete will give it time for you to be able to like run your mag and your floats and your stuff to process the material. Then it will quickly harden. So when you have limestones in there, at some point, someone could, you know, I'm not going to do it because I could care less, but you can go in there and calculate, okay, this volume, if it had lime in it, it would take X amount of years for it to go from soft, wet, muddy deposit to a still soft, firm, but not solidified rock. There's going to be a stage from going from complete water mud to complete hardness of a rock. And so when the Colorado is being cut, at some point during the middle of that process of going from extremely muddy to solidified rock would have been the time that this drained through. So again, you know, we don't have a date to pin down because I don't know if anybody's ever even considered that as a fact. But yes, you can cut through that and create these steep canyons. But just look at the erosion. That at the top of your screen, all of that stuff that does not have green on it is because the top of that is rock. There's no sediment. The sediment has been eroded and taken away with it, and so plants don't grow on rocks very well. But the green areas around it, the sediment has not been removed.
Can you see my mouse cursor?
No. Oh, yep, I can see it. Yeah, that line.
I mean, that kind of looks like a beach line going through there, and you can follow that thing.
Yeah, I believe that would have been a shoreline, and I think when they talk about the Hopi Lake and the Grand Lake, I personally think they've got the lake a little bit too small, because go to the left of your screen, keep scrolling to the left. Yeah, zoom back in, but see where your blue lights are. Go on the left side of the green, the Kaibab Plateau, left side of the green. Now scroll with us going up. Go up to the north. Yeah. See that area that's to the left right there? So the left bottom corner of the screen below see that line that goes over here? All of that in there was eroded also, but that's not part of the Grand Lake. And if you zoom into that, it has the same features of being washed out. I do believe there's two different things here. I believe that was the water that was there when that area was lifted up, and then as that was lifted up, there wasn't a dam there in my opinion, but it washed away the soil because that whole entire area is evidence of being washed away. But I don't think it formed a lake. I think there was water, at the top, left over from the flood, and then when it lifted up, that drained off. But the area where the Grand Lake and the Hopi Lake to the right, about where we're looking now, would be the Grand Lake. That area would have had the water trapped in, which would have been the Hopi Lake and the Grand Lake. Yeah, and right there is Price at the top of your map there. That's Price, Carbon County. That you see a lot of dinosaur bones up in that area. But that's
Right.
the top, and see where that top left corner where your mouse is.
Yeah.
So halfway between there and to the upper left, if you zoom back out, you'll see Utah Lake. There's a place called Summit, Utah, in the middle of that green. And so everything from your mouse would have drained to the right and gone down to the Grand Canyon. And from about your mouse in there, I mean, the map is like a 1 inch by 3/4 inch on my phone. So it's a good thing I know the area. But all the other water that drains from that green on the left side of your screen down to Utah Lake, it would have filled in where Lake Bonneville would have been, and then drained out to the north through Idaho and went out through the Columbia River.
I mean, this does look like this is a very vast mountain range separating the two. And over here, this Helper and Price area, this looked like the farthest most northern, or the northernmost point of what was Grand Lake. Maybe continued through here. I'm not exactly sure, but I've driven through this area several times, man. There is nothing there, but there's a ton of evidence where, just a lot of water was just pulled out and left behind, different rock formations. I mean, I think that's exactly how you get all the arches and whatnot out here in the Moab Canyon area, because you just have a bunch of sediment at the bottom of the lake, and all of a sudden, over a couple of weeks, all that water was just violently pulling out. When you get a lot of moving water, what is it? Not liquefaction, cavitation, I guess, would carve out, what is it? The arches and the canyons and, various caves and whatnot out in that area.
Yeah, so in my world, just going to answer, I think Robin's asking about my name. My name is Dustin, by the way, Robin, if you're asking about me.
Hi, Robin. Come on in.
Glad that you're here, Robin. And Robin, I just want to say, despite our disagreements and stuff, I do appreciate your input, your joining us and questioning us. I just want to point that out. Just wanted to mention that. So I appreciate your participation, even though you disagree. I do appreciate that. And then just going back to that area where you're talking about, when I did excavation, a lot of the places I did work in was in high water table areas. And one of them, I had to put a 35-foot deep storm drain into something where the water table was only about 3 feet below the surface. So I had to shove steel plates in 30 feet deep, and then pump the water out. But when you're working in this material that has a lot of water in it, which is part of the hydroplate theory, that when you dig the dirt out and create a hole, it all of a sudden changes the pressure. So all the water outside of the hole is going to want to come into the hole. Okay. But since it's pressure at the top of the ground, you're going to have less pressure as you are going to be in the bottom. So what happens in that process? The material from the bottom will collapse into the trench before the top of the trench comes in, which is exactly what we see with the arches being created. Is as the water's coming down, like the sediment's coming down, the bottom underneath is going to erode because the pressure in the liquid pressure in the sands and in the wet soil is going to give way at the bottom sooner. And where I was mentioning earlier that there's a certain stage in between completely wet sediment to fully solidified rock, in between that is going to be somewhere where it can still retain some structural strength. So when the arches are being created, you know, that part hasn't eroded, where this was a lot more liquid, but because of the draining out, your liquid would be draining out from the top at a slower rate than at the bottom, but it's still going to be drawing out. So this portion of the arches that's been removed would naturally want to escape with the water faster than the top of it, and that's how the arches would be formed, was from the floodwaters carrying the sediment away during the time where the lime in this, or if it didn't have lime, there's a certain time where these things can happen, where it's kind of strong, but because of the liquefaction underneath, and that's what I did. I had to deal with, I wasn't concerned about the soil at the top of my trench, but at 30 feet down, I was really concerned, and so I had to make sure everything was tight, because the bottom will just bring in high volumes of sand, and it can be a very big problem if you don't know how to deal with that. And so when I see stuff like the arches, it's like I relate that to the things I had to deal with when I'm putting in storm drains in high water table areas where the soil is weak. The top always bridges. I never have to worry about the top. The bottom will always cave out underneath quicker. And so again, that shows better evidence. If it was slow erosion over millions of years, it would erode from the top down and it would be all solid rock. That you're not going to get that. And these arches are not created by wind either. Yes, there's wind erosion, but wind isn't going to create that. The water is going to erase it quicker. And that's where like I said, the details, right? When you go into it, millions of years doesn't explain that, but the flood does, because of the characteristics of how liquefaction, how the water pressure in the soil as it was drying out, the water's draining out from below. And then, just tell me when to stop, but I can go for 5 hours on stuff. So, but to the north of that,
you're good. Keep going.
Okay, so to the north of that, if you want to go back to your map, just so that people get an understanding, going back to the video, but bring up Google Earth, and I want to go from Green River. We're going to follow the Green River, not the Colorado. Okay. So if you just start at Green River, Utah.
Yeah, 1 second here.
While you're bringing that up, what I'm bringing up is Kent Hovind was saying that the water from Montana is draining down into the Colorado, and that's a lot of
on the western slope.
Yeah, and so if you go to the Colorado, and it's right there, see where to the left, you can see a canyon being cut out. Almost. So that's the Green River. So, the Green River, if you follow that, it'll go up and kind of more into the green, but it'll take you up to Vernal. You can see in the center. Well, it's to the right of your screen now. If you might have to zoom in and scroll up.
Yeah.
So right there, if you follow that more, we're gonna I'm trying to remember where it's at. Stop right there. Zoom in right there. See the bottom of your screen, the very bottom. See where it makes that really big horseshoe? Okay, that's a horseshoe bend. Zoom in on that. This is another one of those problem areas. Make sure this is the right one. So it would be, I think, so hard to see on this phone. It's, so that right loop that's under that right box now, it's the top right corner. That horseshoe bend. See how that river, actually, that's a great view. So, see how the Colorado River again is cutting through a mountain. It's another one of these.
This is your Green
This
River.
is the Green River. If I said Colorado, I'm sorry. This is the Green River that feeds into the Colorado down at Moab. But see that mountain range? Again, we have another situation where the river cuts through a higher point on the mountain rather than going around. And the geological accepted theory on this is that the ground above all of this area was higher, and that the river
So that's
existed
2,000 foot.
before, and so it all eroded away as it worked its way down. It cut through it. Yeah, you're down to the So, but that sharp bend, I don't know if you can go into a 3D view.
Well, I kind of am.
Yeah. So I want to focus on. I mean, all of this is showing that, but like the very tight bend up there. Yeah, if you kind of go in from that a little bit more, but see the problem with these areas is they're being cut through these large mountain areas, and their only way to explain this, and it's fine if you want to believe that, is that that area had to have all of that material above the high point of those mountains, and the river would need to be on top of that, cutting through before it got down to the mountain. So all of the material around it just disappears. That's their answer for all of these situations, is that the ground was higher. And so as the ground eroded, the river cut through the mountain as it got further and further and further down. Again, this is a river cutting through, supposedly at about the same rate as all of the sediment around it had to have gone with it at about the same rate. This is what I'm talking about. If you want to accept that and you believe it, great. For me, it doesn't work. It does not work, because if you go to the north side, which I think we're facing east or west, I mean, slightly to the south, maybe to like a 280 degree, I think we're on. But to the right where that white box is, that's a lot lower ground. If the river is going to go anywhere, it's going to take the ground.
I was checking.
Right?
It's
So
2,000
why is it? Yeah, and so when you know, like even where the river on the right, where it goes straight up and down, to the left would be a better place for the river to go if it was going to go anywhere. It's going to cut through places that are lower, not higher. This is what I'm talking about. Is your theory works as so long as you don't zoom in. The other part of it is you have to make up things, like there was a bunch of material mile above that, and that the river existed before, and as it all eroded, that's their only way they can justify it. But to me, I don't like that. If it works for you, great. For me, it doesn't. And then anyways, if you keep going up and following this, it goes up into the and the other thing too is see the features there. If you go back to where you were, go backwards. See how the areas that doesn't have green is the rock layers exposed. And me, every time I see those, all I see is a mass amount of sediment that had been washed away from the flood. It just explains it so much better. And I think I got to remember, because the river splits, but I think the one that's just off your screen to the left is the one that goes up to Wyoming, Rock Springs, which would be, what is that place? There's a dam up there, and I know the name. For some reason, I can't remember. Anyways, as the water works through Wyoming, it's draining through all of these mountain ranges going south, which is really weird, because again, you can't claim that only that tiny area had erosion. You have to claim it over the entire Rocky Mountain region, the entire thing, because if you zoom into any place in these places where the rivers cut through mountains, their only explanation is that the water has to be, or the ground has to be above the mountains when the river formed, and then as all the sediment and everything eroded around it over millions of years, that's how it cut through the mountains, and it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work for me.
Here's some more evidence that supports the creationist theory. So they say it took the Grand Canyon about 70 million years to form, right? Well,
Yep.
The oldest river on the planet, or one that's at least as old as the Colorado River that they say, is the Nile River. Why isn't there a Grand Canyon in Africa? If it takes that long for water to erode a canyon away, why isn't there one on the Nile River? Why isn't there one on the Mississippi River, which is just about as old? I think actually some article said that the Mississippi River is 10 million years older than the Colorado River. Why isn't there a Grand Canyon there? I've been to over the Mississippi River many times. I mean, you're talking at most you see the sides maybe 100 feet above the water's edge. not a mile deep.
Right. Speaking of that, because I want to take you back, can you go down to, it'd probably be easier just to go to Grand Canyon Village. And then I don't know if you can also pull up a picture. It really doesn't matter what river, just like maybe Google search a water erosion river and see if you can, because it's going to be rounded. When water erodes anything, it's going to be smooth. Okay, now I want you to click on, let's see, it just go, yeah, maybe straight north. I want you to go into the middle of that, and maybe you might have to switch over to maps. I don't know if Google Earth does it, but you can actually do Street View in the middle of the Grand Canyon. I don't know if you know that, but I want you to go down into I just getting you in the area, so you're going to go to left down into the Grand Canyon. And maybe this will work too, but
it's not going to be as detailed.
Can you go to the like maps, Google Maps?
Yeah,
because Google Maps, they've taken river boats down in there, so you can get street view of the Colorado River. If you go into that area, while you're bringing up, what I'm talking about is when you have water erosion, then rocks are going to be rounded and smooth. That's just a feature of water erosion, especially over millions of years. You're going to have smooth, washed out features to show that the water has eroded. The problem is where I'm taking you to, there's 1,200 feet of basement rock that the Colorado supposedly cut through, and it's just sharp edges showing no water erosion, except for right at the very bottom. Right, like within the fluctuation of the Colorado River, it starts to get smooth at the last couple feet above the water, which is where the water has been.
I'm there. Let me share the screen here. Okay.
Yeah, so just, let's see, yeah. I'm going to zoom in too.
I can make that screen on.
Yeah, I want you to go down into the center of the like the Colorado River itself, down in the bottom. Because what I want to show that the geologists cannot, or they'll either ignore or they can't explain, is why the Colorado River did not make those canyons smooth.
Yeah, I'm the worst guy to use this. I'm not very familiar with.
Clear over there in New Mexico. Yeah, so if you just go out of street view and just go back to the map view, I'll help you.
Zoom in down here is what you wanted?
Yep, so click on anywhere in there now, click that. Oh, that's a bridge. That might work.
Well, what spot do you want? I just chose.
Actually, right there. You can just go up or down just go to the right maybe or to the left. Just really anywhere in these deep actually to the right would be better. It's when you're trying to do it on video, it might be better to do yeah, just anywhere in the middle there. Right there's great. Click your button. Not in that area because that's harder to see. Maybe. Yeah, they're on the shore. Go in the canyon area like see where it's deeper right there. So the left of you, right there. Don't go in the canyon areas. Now so where your red is, just zoom back into your red. You're going too far. I only want you to go like 100 feet. I mean, you can do any of these. I'm just trying to pick a spot that's going to be easier to zoom in. So
down by the river, up on the slope. What do you want?
Okay, so see your red marker down on the bottom right?
Yeah.
Just go to the left. Stop. Right there. Just click in where your mouse was. Sorry, you moved your mouse. Right there where your mouse is. The only reason I'm picking this is I'm not trying to be deceptive. I'm just click on the river right there. Just because it's higher canyon walls, it would just work better for this video to show because I want to zoom into that. Okay, turn around. Now we picked another one of these canyons. I don't want where water is coming out. That actually helps. See all those rough rocks? Yeah, so up to the right, if you zoom into Yeah, there's a head in the Colorado. Just go to the right. What I'm trying to show is the sharp edges of the rocks. Because if it's river cut, right? If the river cut this, then these walls should be smooth. So just zoom to the, yeah, go down or whatever. You might have to go in the middle of the river to look at those. Just, you don't want to select, see where you're wanting
not
to
all
select
of
where
these.
rivers come out, and you just go in between. So where you see the little side canyons cutting in, it's not best go
Yeah,
there
I'm
because
trying to
there's a lot
find a
of
spot,
erosion.
but nothing.
I mean, any of them work. I'm just trying to make
Here's
it so
one.
it's easy
Okay.
for people to see. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so the problem is if the Colorado River cut these walls, and we're trying to zoom into these walls here, is they're sharp. These walls, show me how the Colorado would create these sharp edges. Like I said, you can pick on, I'm just trying to pick a spot that's easier to show on a little camera. Those are sharp. Those are sharp, and it doesn't matter where you go along this section. This is the basement rock. So to put it in perspective, there's about 1,200 feet of basement rock. So you're going to get into the harder materials, non-granite and basalt type rocks, metamorphic rocks, basalt type rocks, heavier rocks. Whereas above this 1,200 foot deep basement rock section, that above that is where you get your limestone, sandstones, the depositation from the flood. This stuff is pre-flood. We're below the depositation of the pre-flood. So if you pick any of these bottom areas in these canyons, you see the walls. One's got a lot of trees around it, but especially out at the bottom, they're sharp. They're jagged. They're not. There's no evidence of water erosion by a river in anywhere in this basement canyon in this section of this. The hydroplate theory talks about this.
I mean, wouldn't there
That it was,
river rock at least
see that? Yeah,
in
see that?
spots?
Zoom into those rocks. There, I mean, yes, some of those rocks could have came down from the cliff edge. It's hard to tell right now, but some of these don't look like they've fallen off from above down into here. We just got to make sure we identify the correct rocks so we're not falsely identifying a rock that fell from the top, landed in the bottom. But when you look at these rocks that are clearly not fallen from the top down into the bottom, that are not sedimentary rocks, and you start going into the more basement rocks of like even granite, like granite and basalts, right? Yeah, zoom in, go straight into the right wall on that. Just zoom into those walls. Anywhere where there's walls, it's rough and jagged, rough and jagged, rough and jagged. Rivers don't do that. They don't do that. If you want to look at a water erosion, that's always smooth and rounded. That's why river rocks are round and smooth, because the water eroded it. Yeah, that's a great spot. Look at the jaggedness on these things, right? And we got to make sure that we're not looking at the jaggedness from when we cut the trail.
If it took millions of years to carve through this hard rock, and you have softer sediment in spots that the Nile River go through, why is it there a canyon this big, the entire 4,000-mile length of the Nile River, or the entire, what is it, 1,800-mile
right now? Exactly.
Yeah.
That picture you're looking at now, that whole wall is jagged. There is no evidence of a water erosion. The Colorado did not cut this canyon. You cannot make the claim when you zoom into the details of this, and I challenge anyone to take a Colorado River trip and take photos of the sidewalls and see at the bottom where the Colorado kind of makes a bend, and you can see, yes, right there. See where that light colored material is? At the bottom, this is where the only place you see along the Colorado River is like the bottom few feet right before you hit the Colorado River. The only place in the Colorado area that shows where water has been eroding and smoothing off rocks. You go 4 feet above that and you start to lose that evidence. See that? See the water level and then nothing. But above that, see above the shore right there, straight in center of the screen, above where the water goes. Again, it goes back to jagged rocks. You do not get that when you have water erosion in a river. So that right there just proves that the Colorado River did not cut this canyon. It did not. This this, when the flood took out the sediments above this 1,200-foot bottom section of the Grand Canyon, it took out the wet, softer post-flood material. What we're looking at is pre-flood material. And this canyon got split open because of the weight being removed off of the surface. All that material above that got washed off, that created a weak spot. And whenever you have a weak spot where material is moved, this crust on the bottom is going to lift up. And what we're seeing is that lifted up, which caused a crack in the crust, in the hard basement rocks of the Grand Canyon. It opened up the rocks, which explains why it's jagged and not smooth. Then the river ended up going into the canyon. So the river, the Colorado, did not cut the basement, this 1,200-foot deep part of the basement. It didn't cut it. It fell, the water went into a crack as it opened up. Because of water, the evidence of this, and I'd challenge any geologist with a bit of honesty to them to prove to me that you can create rough, jagged walls with a river cutting through. The other thing is, while you're considering that, the Colorado River has been tested, and there is 75 feet on average of sand and rocks and gravel between the bottom of the water and the basement of the material. Oh, someone's coming here. 1 second.
You got to knock on the door, or someone's coming into the studio. Well, I just happened to pull up, there's this video, you can look it up on YouTube. It's called Experiments in Stratification. I'm going to try to, I don't have anything marked. It's a good 35-minute video, but let me see if I can share some of it. And it shows how experiments of sideways moving water will lay down layers of geologic strata. See here, I need to go over here and share this tab. Let's see here. All right, I'm just going to pick a spot here.
Stratification of the deposit under both dry and water conditions formed parallel to the slope of the initial area of deposit, which could exceed 30 degrees. The results were published by the Geological Society of France. The discovery that strata form sideways and vertically at the same time.
Yeah, so somewhere in this video they show this machine where they basically have a recycling river just flowing over the top of random sediments poured in there. And then as it churns it up, it lays it out and sorts out the sediments by density.
Strata form in the same way as sequences of facies. The chronology of strata is measured laterally and vertically, provides probably the most important data to emerge from any experiment in sedimentology. The equally important discovery was the fact earlier mentioned. When the basic principles of geology had been devised, they amazingly had not taken hydraulic conditions into account. Of course, one strata will superpose upon another.
So I don't know if there's a copyright on this one, so I got to skip through it.
This basic fact had not emerged because of the conviction that sedimentary deposits were time-dependent. The principle of superposition, believed to account for all stages of the geological column, supported the concept of very slow deposition over long periods of time. Experiments on sediment transported by water with varying currents challenged.
Okay, so I've traveled all over the country in parts of Canada, and you can even go on Google Images and look at just various images of strata all over the world. I'm kind of getting a little library together of images from different countries just to kind of use this in a better presentation, but one thing to notice is the layers of strata are all similar. Now, during the flood, the entire world was underwater, right, according to the book of Genesis. And let's look at some of the physics that are going on there. So around the equator, the Earth is rotating right about at 1,000 miles an hour. So you'll get 1,000-mile-an-hour tidal change. And I don't have the paperwork in front of me, but basically you'd get an estimated 200-foot tidal changes all over the world. And so you'd have a 200-foot swell of water coming in at 1,000 miles an hour and then leaving at 1,000 miles an hour. That is really going to cheer up the sediments underneath it. And if it did that for about a year, and then it laid it out horizontally, you'd get all of your different fossils and your different sediments spread out by density all over the planet. And that's what we see out there. We don't see, like when you look at the in between the layers of geologic strata, if it's been there for millions of years, there should be erosion marks, but we don't find any of that. There should be root layers spread out. We don't find any of that. So yeah, that's kind of what you see. I wish I could pull up a video of Answers in Genesis and Is Genesis History. They have some really good stuff. Maybe I can at least show a picture of their links. You guys can go and watch it yourself because, I don't want to get a strike here on YouTube by playing it, but they have some really good detailed information that explain just that. I mean, you're talking several hours of evidence that show exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and just to put a point on that, it's really hard sometimes for us to present our case to people that don't understand our case, right? So if you don't understand hydroplate theory or the critical plate tectonics theories and these different theories that different creationists have aligned to, it's really hard because you're arguing from a point that we don't agree with, right? Like the example of, well, there's not enough water to cover Mount Everest. We don't need that much water because Mount Everest didn't exist pre-flood. So if you don't understand it, it's going to be hard to understand. So yeah, I would highly recommend people, if you're curious, dive into, right? Look into it. But, just kind of picking up where I left off of is, the side walls of the Grand Canyon that are not water eroded, that needs to be explained. And there is no good explanation that's given. There just isn't. You've got rough and rugged and sharp rock walls along the Colorado River up to 1,200 feet deep that just disprove that the Colorado could have cut that. It just doesn't. Not to mention that we're talking about a lot denser, more solid rock than the sedimentary above it. So if the Colorado is to go through the sediments, like the sedimentary rocks and the limestones and sandstone depositation, at the upper part of the Grand Canyon, then if it hits the basement rocks, they're a lot harder. Again, naturally, the river would grow wider, not cut down. It may cut down slightly, but it's more likely going to cause the Grand Canyon to go wider, not deeper, once it hits the more solid rock. Because if you're right, we're talking at 1,200 feet above the Grand Canyon, or we're talking about right now, right? That line between the denser, heavier basement rocks, at that line between the sedimentaries, the limestones, the sandstones, the river's going to naturally take out what's weaker. But we don't see the evidence of that in the Grand Canyon. It shows that it supposedly the Colorado River cut through the basement rocks faster than it did the softer sediment rocks. And again, when you zoom in, this stuff just starts to not make sense. And so, are you going to hold on to your belief system because you want it to be millions of years and ignoring the fact that there's no way that the Colorado River would have cut the basement rocks is faster. And the other part of this is these side canyons, you zoom into them right now, most of those are dry. Occasionally there's a little bit of water, but why are those side canyons cut as deep as the Colorado River is? I don't know any place where dry dry rivers cut just as fast as bigger wet ones like the Colorado. So these are the questions that I want answered, and the millions of years of erosion just simply is not going to do that. And then going on to the brought up these layers. You have all these different layers of sedimentation throughout the Grand Canyon. The reason we use the Grand Canyon the most is because we have the most exposed layers. They're massive. Some of these layers, I mean, they go down New Mexico, all the way up, Wyoming, Montana, even higher, out into Kansas and stuff, one layer over that entire area. But it doesn't matter where you go, you pretty much do not see any erosion marks cut into this.
Hey, let me mention something about those vast layers. So on the southern,
go for it. Oh, just FYI, just so you know, this house is on solar and it has 2 inverters. One of them died last night, so the guy that showed up that interrupted is just an electrician that's here to see that. So I might have to leave for a minute too here and there, just so you know.
Oh, you should have hired me. I'd have taken a free trip. I wouldn't have even charged you. Just fly me out to Hawaii.
Yeah, I did. Come on out. For some reason, under the inverters doesn't have power, and the problem is I have no tools, so I can't test what the problem is.
Well, one thing you see in those, massive layers that stretch out for hundreds of miles is round river rock, right? So you have this vast layer that, covers thousands of square miles that are hundreds of miles wide, where there never was a river in place, with all this round gravel rock, right? So have you ever seen a rock tumbler? It's one of those little metal cans, and you put a bunch of rocks to polish them for a week. You annoy the heck out of your parents while this thing's churning, and then you take them out a week later, and then you have these smooth polished rocks. Well, during the flood, while those tides are going in and out, it's going to act like a giant rock tumbler and turn that stuff up and spread those layers out over thousands of square miles with that very smooth river rock out there. It doesn't take a river to do that. And a river, covering thousands and thousands of square miles isn't documented anywhere,
Right.
Explanation for a flood, man.
The other thing to go along with that, we have it documented by drill cores and everything else. Like, this is something that everybody agrees on, that we have these large, sediment deposits, large, that are covering multiple states. And in order for geologists accepting the old earth theology, the only way that those deposits could happen is it has to be eroded from something else. Because that type of material, where's it going to come from if it's not eroded? We have volcanoes that are producing different types of soils coming out, but the problem is their method doesn't answer it because it's not part of their diagram. Volcanoes, in their theory, punch out lava rock, which is going to be, it's magma, and so it's going to be metamorphic rocks type coming out, but that's not what sedimentary is. So I would like to know where did this material come from, and why was there no mountains before that, and why is there no erosion of canyons cut in any of these multiple layers, going from the very bottom to the oldest layers to the top in that that column that we see all the dinosaur bones in. That entire column, you go in these places, you'll only find minor one here or minor one there, which does make sense if you're going to be layering flooding, and sometimes, a layer gets deposited and maybe some water drains to a lower portion before, the next layer gets deposited on rapidly. And that's all we see, tiny, tiny little canyons. And I'm talking like a couple feet, maybe 10 feet at the most. But they're extremely rare, and most of them are after something has been lifted up, not while it was depositation. But you go in the Grand Canyon, the entirety of it, over the 200 miles of space that we can see, there's no canyons cut in it. The only canyon is the one that carved it out, which is where the Colorado River is sitting now. But you look on the wall, and there's no erosion. There's no canyons cut in, showing that this canyon got cut in this layer, and then the next layer filled in. We don't have that. They're uniform. They're they're flat and they're massive. We're not talking little areas. They're multiple states, right? For these rock layers, and like I said, going into the details, I have to keep bringing it up because that's where the problems are. When you zoom into this, that's where the problem. Yes, that's exactly. That's one rock layer, and you can go pretty much anywhere in that, and you'll never find a canyon like we see today, right? The Provo River, the Mississippi River, the Colorado River. All of these river systems only exist today after all this depositation has happened, which is explained by a global flood, which cannot be explained by millions of years of mountain building and erosion. Like that's their go-to.
This one's from Answers in Genesis. What it says here, since it's kind of blurry, I don't know if you can read it. It says the sedimentary rock layers exposed in the walls of the Grand Canyon belong to 6 megasequences that can be traced across North America. At the base of these layers are huge boulders and sand layers that are evidence of sediments being laid down rapidly across the entire USA. That's a country-sized layer.
Yeah. And the problem is guess what's not in any of those 6 layers you mentioned? There's no canyons that were formed before the next layer was formed. So there's no erosion between all of these layers over millions and millions of years. There's no evidence of biomaterial in between these layers. So if a layer is being built and then, the next layer starts, there's nothing growing in between there either. Yet we find bones in these. So if nothing's growing, how do we find bones in there when there's no evidence of any biomass of any source of plants and trees and stuff like that, except for fossils buried in the middle of them, right? And on my Facebook, I posted a couple things where I don't think I did this one yet, but there's limestone. I've mentioned it before. Limestone layer, one of these big mega sequences down southwest of Sydney, Australia. And in these limestone sequences that was deposited, you have limestone that's been radiometric dated to be 45 million years old. Embedded in the middle of it, so there's no evidence it could come out of, that it could have been put inside of. This limestone is wood that's been encapsulated inside of the limestone. When they carbon date these, they're carbon dating them to about 23 to 24,000 years old. Or no, it's 43,000 years old in this case. I was referencing a different one. 43,000 years old carbon dated in 45 million year old rock layers. But again, these don't have any evidence of erosion of canyons in them, but yet we're finding things embedded into these as if it was liquid when it was formed in its entirety, and encased inside are fragments that got washed in as it was mud. The millions of years, they can't answer it. They can't. They try to make up stuff like, oh, it got washed in, or it got pushed in, or whatever, right? They don't have an answer, so they just say something stupid.
And you think you wrap it up in about 5 or 10 minutes? Getting a little tired. Kind of want to go to sleep.
Yeah, no problem. So, for me on my end, again, when I started this program tonight with what I was saying, things make sense if you stay zoomed out. The Mormon church, it sounds like it could be true if you're born into it. But when you zoom in and you start to see, like Joseph Smith, his 1832 vision account is radically different than his 1838 one. Well, if you really seen God, then why is the two accounts different? The first account, Joseph Smith only seen the Lord, whereas 6 years later, he's seen both the Jesus and God, right? So this is one of those scenarios when something sounds good until you zoom in and you realize, wait a second, there's a problem that clearly doesn't fit. Geology is the same thing. We're seeing features like the Colorado River cannot cut the Grand Canyon. It can't do it because the evidence isn't there. When you're finding carbon dated material, 20 to 50,000 years old embedded in the middle of, a limestone layer that's dated 45, 60, 80 million years, you really need to step back. Is like, am I going to really continue to believe this lie? Or is there a better answer for it? And I believe that, young earth creationists have better answers to suit these things. And that's where I just like to leave that. Oh, I got one more thing I was going to say, though. Out of all my evidence to why I know that there's a creator and that the Bible is true and that God created everything is this right here. Chocolate and candy and sugar. My goodness, these things are yummy. Only a creator could make something so yummy for us, right?
Well, I think Jesus was the Son of God because he came down into the world to change the law so we could eat bacon, man. You know, that's the only explanation I got.
Yeah, my thing with Jesus and the law is, he is the law. So when he came down, the reason he could be perfect and be blameless is because, it's not that hard to be obedient to the law if you are the law. If the rules were that I could be me and that's the law, then I can obey the law perfectly, right? And that's the way Jesus is. Jesus is God, and it is God's laws that he is obedient to, which is his nature, and so he could easily be obedient to the law or advance the law, right, from the old covenant to the new covenant is better explanation and better application of the law. So yeah, if the law wants to create this beautiful chocolate candy, in fact, by the way, you don't know, there's a tree called cacao tree, and that is a tree that grows chocolate. They chocolate beans, and then you take the beans out. Well, I got one right here that's got 4 or 5 chocolate pods on it that I probably should grab because it's ripe. Yeah, I'll make my own chocolate. God made us a chocolate tree, and I'm thanking him for that.
Let me wrap it up with these last couple thoughts here. So 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 3 and 5 says, knowing this first, that there shall come in the last days scoffers, walking after their own lust, and saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of the creation. For this they are willingly ignorant of the word that the heavens are of old, and the earth that is standing in the water and out of the water. The Bible also says, the heaven and the earth will pass away, but my word lasts forever. This says that his words last beyond space-time. God is eternal, and all he wants is for us to dwell with him. That's why he sent Christ. That's why he became man, because there was no one worthy. There was no intercessor that was available. There was none good, no, not one. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. So in order for us to be righteous in his eyes, because there was nothing at all that we could do, he needed to put the sacrifice on himself. So he became man in the form of Jesus Christ, who was the only person to walk without sin. And what did we do? We spat in his face. We ripped the beard off his face. We beat the crud out of him with a cat of 9 tails and nailed him to a cross and murdered him because of our own selfish lust and our own selfish pride and our own selfish desire. Let me put it into perspective. I've said this a few times on this channel. If any of you have children, would you take one of your children and nail them to a tree for somebody who wants to spit in your face and mock you? That's what God did for you. All he asked us to do was believe. There's plenty of evidence out there that shows the Bible story is true, that the flood did happen. This is Pride Month, right? They do represent, they want to use God's symbol of the rainbow for their own pride. This isn't attacking them. I love those people. But they're taking the symbol that God said he's not going to destroy the world with water. He's not going to flood the world. There is evidence for that. The Grand Canyon is one of those geological points of interest, for lack of a better term, to show us that a flood is real and it's possible. Just take off the blinders and realize that the world and life cannot create itself, and that his majesty is within everything that we see. It can't physically happen by itself. And it is not about us, it is about him. That being said, thank you guys very much. Got any closing thoughts at all,
Yeah,
DC?
I just wanted to add one scripture, and I'm done. God tells us that He'll give people over to a lie if they don't want the truth, right? So when God created this world, He created ways for people to, if they don't have a heart for God and could care less for Him, He's given them over to a lie to believe in, and some of these lies, in my opinion, would be plate tectonics with subduction zones that create mountains. Evolution of millions of years. But what God also tells us in Proverbs 25:2 is that it is the glory of God to conceal a thing, but it is the honor of kings to search it out. God has shown in His Word that if you don't care for Him, you don't care for the truth, you just want to support your belief, whatever it is, outside of God, that He'll give you over to that. There'll be enough evidence that you'll be convinced that whatever lie you're believing in is true. And that no matter what evidence is given, you're going to continue to believe that lie. And God says that He'll do that to you because you don't have a heart for righteousness. But in that Proverbs verb I said, it's the glory of God to conceal a thing, right? So the truth is often revealed in mystery in a place that might be hard to get to. But when you give yourself to God, what He does is He unlocks the things that are concealed and hidden, and He will, the honor of kings to search out a matter. This is the ProverbsGuys Ministry, and I'm so glad you actually did this in honor of this channel, because this is Proverbs 25:2. Our job is to search it out, and if we're doing it with a heart for God and a heart for the truth, even if that means we have to let go of lies, that God will reveal the truth. The stuff I've expressed today came from God. I wanted the truth no matter where it took me. I was given the truth that proved that the Mormon church was not true. I left the church because of that. God revealed it to me because I had a heart to follow the truth, despite the fact that I lost a lot of family, friends, money, business because of it. And that's why God has given me the truth, and I escaped from it because I had a heart for the truth. And because of that, and my desire to seek the truth and go wherever it leads me, God unlocked these mysteries. And I feel like I have answers to problems that I've had for a long time, simply because I gave myself over to the Holy Spirit. So if you're having a hard time believing any of this stuff, it's probably because you're not right with God. And if you're an atheist, you're probably not, you're going to stay that way. You have to be open to the truth and allow God to reveal it to you. Otherwise, He's just going to let you die in your lies. And just got to ask yourself, is the truth more important than just believing your lie? If these evidences don't convince you that there's something wrong with your belief, then what else could God do, and what else could we do? And I just want to end on that.
Well, thanks, brother. Looking forward to doing another one.
Yep, just let me know. We'll do some more. There's a lot of cool places to explore and see the evidence of what we're talking about.
All right. Have a wonderful night, guys.
Stand
You
still
too. Good night.
and see the salvation of the Lord. What would you think are the two most common words that Christians use when they're in a panic or in a crisis? Do something. Do something, Lord. It's absolutely against human nature to stand still and do nothing when there's a crisis and there's trouble and difficulty on all hands. And probably the most difficult thing for even Christians is to stand still and wait for God to act. To stand still to see the salvation of the Lord. Even the most devoted of Christians panic when God doesn't move according to their time schedule. We're always giving God dates. We're always giving Him a time limit. Lord, if you don't do it by now or by tomorrow or by next week, it's too late. God is never too late, and He's going to do it not on your schedule, not on mine. He's going to do it on His own schedule. But God is always and has always been searching the earth for those who will trust Him in their crisis, in every trial, and especially when it seems hopeless. And He will lead us. Listen closely. He will lead us into situations that are alarming, that are critical, that seem hopeless, to test us. Devil has nothing to do with it at all. It's God leading into the crisis. The Bible states fairly clearly, the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. Psalms 37:23. And that in Hebrew is prearranged, step by step, fixed, ordained by God. I'm going to tell you something. I believe that every step that I take is prearranged by my Father. Every step that I take is ordered by the Lord. Now, if I believe that, if I'm in a crisis, if I'm in a very, very difficult situation, He's led me there. Because He doesn't stop for a moment while He says, well, you're about to go into a trial. I direct you up to this point. You're on your own now. He directs me into it, through it, and out of it. The steps of a good man, and we are good only by the blood of Jesus anyhow. There's no goodness in us. A good man made righteous through the blood of Jesus Christ is her steps ordered by the Lord. God's Word is filled with examples of this. And by the way, it's hard to accept. Think about it for a minute. It's very, very hard to accept this concept that the most difficult, critical times in your life have been prearranged by the Lord. That they are His doing. And folks, when you begin to see that and accept it and understand it, then you're halfway through your problem.